Hi guys. Today we are going to talk about prokaryotes versus eukaryotes. This is as a follow-up to our conversation about cell theory. So just to keep in mind, cell theory has three main components. Part one of cell theory says that all living things are made of cells. Part two of cell theory says that the cell is the basic unit of all structure and function in living things. And part three of our cell theory tells us that all cells come from other cells. But let's talk about those cells themselves. You see what I did there? All right, so there are two major categories in cells. The first category of cell is called the prokaryote. The prokaryote is a cell, which if you break up the word prokaryote, the prefix pro means before, and karyote comes from the Greek meaning nucleus. So a prokaryote is actually a cell that developed before nucleuses were a thing. In other words, these are one of the very first forms of life that evolved here on planet Earth. So prokaryote literally translates into no nucleus. Um, all right, so what else do they have besides no nucleus? Well, they have DNA. And they should have DNA because please remember, cells are the basic unit of all life, and all life has a genetic component, right? All living things have that universal genetic code, right? So they do have DNA. The thing is, though, they do not have DNA contained inside a nucleus because DNA is not a nucleus because prokaryotes do not have nuclei. Not only do they not have nucleuses, but they do not have organelles either. So what is an organelle? So think of your body, right? Your body has organs. It has a heart, it has lungs, it has a stomach, it has a brain, it has these organs that all have a function. So organelles are like itty bitty tiny organs inside your cells. Well, these prokaryotes are such a basic or first evolved or first prototype of life. They don't even have organelles. What do the prokaryotes have? They have a DNA, they have cytoplasm, they have ribosomes, which are necessary for transmitting the genetic information, and they have cell membranes, but that is about it. That's all they have. All right. So in terms of size, prokaryotes usually are much smaller than eukaryotic cells, which are the other types of cells we'll talk about here in a minute. And this is important because prokaryotes are also bacteria. So why is that important? It is important because of this. Consider you getting sick or somebody you love getting sick. They can feel not so great, and then the next day they can feel horrible. The small size of the prokaryote means that they can divide very, very quickly. So you can go from being not so sick to very sick very quickly, which is why the advent of antibiotics, these medicines that can kill bacteria, were a huge boon to the medical profession when they were developed. When we have a prokaryote, all prokaryotes are unicellular, meaning that they only are made up of one cell. So they are a unicellular one cell organism. All right. The other type of cell that exists is the eukaryotic cell. Okay. So the eukaryotic cell, again, if we break up that word, the prefix EU, means true, and karyotic still, it means nucleus. So a eukaryotic cell is a true nucleus cell. So what does that mean? That means that these have nucleus. If you look at them underneath a microscope, you will see a darker center in that cell that contains all of the genetic information. Of course, as always, that genetic information is what we call DNA. Same as in the prokaryotes. The DNA is actually a little bit different. Prokaryotic DNA tends to be a single strand, it's circular. Eukaryotic DNA tends to be individual strips of DNA, but we'll get into that later. The DNA, of course, is surrounded by a nuclear membrane, which of course means that we have that true nucleus. It is contained inside that membrane. Prokaryotic cells also have organelles. Mitochondria, chloroplast, Golgi body, vacuoles, these are all organelles, itty bitty tiny organs inside those cells that have specific functions. Eukaryotic cells tend to be smaller. Prokaryotic tends to be very, very small. So eukaryotic cells tend to be much larger than prokaryotes. All animal cells are eukaryotic. All plant cells are also eukaryotic. So taking a look at these pictures up at the top, prokaryotes on the side over here, you can see all the DNA, nice and loose. Um, Again, those little blue dots are the ribosomes. I know they're hard to see. The green in there is supposed to represent the cytoplasm. And then normally they have this flagellum, which is really just kind of like to help them move around. In eukaryotic, we can see a nice developed nucleus, all these little organelles floating around, and then, of course, still the cell membrane. Over here, we have a protist, which is a single cell organism, which is eukaryotic. So big differences: prokaryotic, no nucleus; eukaryotic has a nucleus. Other differences: prokaryotic, very, very small; eukaryotic, very, very large. Prokaryotic, always unicellular. Eukaryotic can be unicellular, but mostly they are multicellular. For example, you and I, we all have eukaryotic cells and we are multicellular. All right, well, I hope that helps with you completing your notes. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, if you have any questions, please pop into office hours. Have a good one.